All right, today, I know we've all been waiting for this decision for a while, and we were wondering what was going to happen. So when this came down, what came into your head? What did you think?
Relief, primarily that the rule of law has prevailed here, that the Supreme Court ruled, I think, in favor of common sense that the president does not have the power to to impose tariffs on a whim, that tariffs are not synonymous with regulation, as the administration insisted, and that there has to be, yeah, that the rule of law is upheld. That's primarily my thinking. I think it would be a mistake to think that this means that we're past tariffs. I think the administration has showed consistently that it remains committed to tariffs. I think it will try to backfill these tariffs with other tariffs under other authorities. So I don't think we're out of the woods yet in terms of tariffs, but this is a victory, again, for the rule of law and the fact that the president cannot just impose tariffs, I think, spontaneously or, again, on a whim.
With a wide breadth, basically,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. He has such latitude to impose that there are guardrails
Yeah.
in place.
That was the first thing I wondered when I saw the decision is obviously some those wide-ranging tariffs, many of those at least need to be rethought by the president and the administration. I'm curious if when they do rethink them, are they going to try to just pack all of those tariffs into the ones that the Supreme Court did not rule against today?
Yeah, so they're going to have some trouble here, and then they do have other authorities to impose tariffs, but they're not. I mean, there's a reason they went with IEPA because they have the most flexibility, and as they interpret it, the most latitude to impose them. So there's another authority, Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974, which states that the executive branch can impose tariffs up to, I believe, 15%, but only for, and they could do it very broadly, up to a maximum of 150 days. And this is to address large and serious balance of payments deficits. So we know the administration has been very animated about the trade deficit. So this would fit, pretty well within their thinking. But again, the issue there is they only get 150 days. Now, could they say, well, guess what? This is a balance of power emergency, and after 150 days, the emergency is still continuing, so we're going to do another 150 days, another 150 days after that. That would seem to go against the spirit of the law, but maybe not the letter. That remains to be seen. And then they have another one called Section 338 of the Tariff Act of 1930. And this has never been employed before, but it does give the president the authority to impose tariffs of up to 50% on imports from any country that, quote, discriminates against U.S. commerce compared to other nations. So that would seem to give some latitude as well. And then there are more traditional authorities that the administration has used before, like Section 301 that they've used against China, Section 232 they've used to impose tariffs on aluminum and steel. But those have to go through a process. There's an investigation. Again, those can't just be imposed, spontaneously as the president likes. So I think that's why there was the preference for the IEPA before, rather than going down these other paths.
So as I try to explain this to viewers, it is complicated. There's a lot of different loopholes and angles. But I feel like when we all went to school, we all understand Congress has the power of the purse. Is that what
Yes.
this comes down to? Is that the crux of this Supreme Court decision today?
Yes, that if the Supreme Court is going to, or I'm sorry, the Supreme Court, if the president, the imposition of broad tariffs is a power held by Congress because tariffs are taxes. Congress has the power to tax. As I believe, the previous Supreme Court ruling, they said, the power to impose taxes is the power to destroy. This is an incredible amount of power. And the president can impose tariffs in certain narrow circumstances, again, with Section 301. But this idea that he can impose sweeping or taxes at his whim is just, that's not found in U.S. law. So I think that's the bottom line here.
moving forward, it feels like we're going to be dealing with refunds, with
Yeah.
legal confusion. Where do you see this moving in the courts? Because it's certainly not done in the courts now. In fact, it might just be getting started.
Yeah, so one of my colleagues blogged about this recently, and he kind of said there's an easy way and there's a hard way of doing this. So theoretically, this doesn't have to be difficult. There's a digital trail showing who paid what, and you can reverse engineer that and refund to those who paid the tariffs. So they can do that, or they can make it difficult. And I believe that President's one of his economic advisors, Kevin Hassett, back in December or so, kind of indicate that they were not inclined to make this easy. We know that I believe thousands of companies have already filed suit to try to get access to their tariff refunds. So there's an appetite. But yeah, it comes down to the administration. How onerous do they want to make this? So that's, and the Supreme Court didn't give any real insight into how this is going to work. So that kind of, that's one of the question marks that are raised now is how is this going to play out?
Okay, the big question I know people watching at home are going to say, hey, if the tariffs are gone, does that mean my stuff's going to be cheaper? I
Yeah.
don't, I feel like they're going to like the answer, but maybe you have a different answer than I'm expecting.
No, yeah, I'll be very surprised if we see any near-term reduction in prices. If for no other reason, then we don't have clarity. They're not going to reduce prices because of a Supreme Court decision. They're going to wait and see, wait for the dust to settle. And again, because the administration has vowed that they're not going, they're extremely committed to tariffs. They're not going to say, "You guys, you got us. We're done with the tariffs. Forget all that." Again, they're going to try to backfill it some way. Maybe it won't be to the same extent because again, the other authorities aren't as sweeping. But I think they're pretty committed to this, so they're not going to go away. I think companies are going to have to. They're going to sit back and say, "Well, what kind of environment are we operating in?" We're not going to raise prices on a day-to-day basis based on announcements like the Supreme Court. So I think that elevated prices will remain because they won't have that, companies won't have that certainty. They won't know the environment until they know that we are permanently in a lower tariff environment. I think that kind of precludes the possibility of near-term price reductions.
Yeah. Okay. That was what I thought.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
do you okay,
That was a
the other
long-winded way of kind of confirming what you were thinking
no,
there.
no, that was good. I make it short. You guys get more deep into it. That's exactly what we're looking for. So, and as far as the economic impact, um, I mean, I think a lot of people are looking at the markets today. Maybe they were expecting some huge rebound, or not that things have even been down, but I think people were maybe expecting a bigger jump. Is this more of a long-term play? Are people trying to figure out what this actually means, dollars wise for these companies, or what?
My suspicion is that a lot of this was already priced in. My recollection is we saw a lot of positive movement in the markets after the tariff hearings, because the writing was on the wall. If you listen to those, the Supreme Court case, it seemed pretty obvious, or it was certainly suggestive that there was a majority in favor of getting rid of these tariffs. If you look at the prediction betting markets, they've been like 80% predicting were the odds that this is going to happen. So had this been totally unexpected, I think you'd see more of a reaction, but I think the markets had kind of priced this in. And then again, we don't know what comes next. Again, this is primarily, I think, a victory for the rule of law, but it does not undo all that. We're not in this. We're back to January, 19th of last year, the same tariff environment. We're going to have. I suspect a lot of people know that we're in for elevated tariffs for some time to come, given the president's consistent commitment to tariff policy. That's not something he's going to easily let go of.
Yeah. So as I try to explain the differences, because I know this, people are going to see a headline and they're going to think tariffs are gone, which they're not, as you have
Yeah,
clearly explained. What do you think is the simplest way to tell people the difference, like between this emergency use of tariffs? So, like, what is impacted? Because things like steel and aluminum, those tariffs are still in
yeah,
place, but these
yes,
wide sweeping against a whole bunch of countries, specifically China,
yes,
those are now
yes.
gone, right?
Yes. So the authority to impose a lot of these tariffs is now gone. But there's still a lot of tariffs that have been imposed that under different authorities that will still remain, like the 301 against China, that's still there. The 232s on steel and aluminum, those are still there. I believe there have been 301 tariffs on other, I think autos, that was also another one that was done. Those are still there. So some tariffs are being removed, at least for the time being, until again, those get backfilled. Uh, but let's not, again, there's still plenty of other tariffs out there under different authorities that are not going away because of this decision.
And you said 301 was used in China, but was this
Yeah, that was
emerges?
used in Trump's first term. He
Okay.
used 301, and those were maintained by Biden. And then I think they may have been further increased under the current one, under the current term. The steel tariffs were first imposed back in Trump one. They were adjusted, tweaked by Biden, and then Trump increased them from 25% to 50% last year. Um, and again, there's so many in place right now, it's hard to keep track of them all. But yeah, IEPA was the one that was kind of used as the cudgel to secure all these different trade deals that he was doing. Say, okay, we'll relax those if you give us what we want in part of these trade deals. And yeah, what happens to those deals? That's up in the air too, because those were all under the IEPA gun. Well, that tool's been taken away from the administration. So what happens now to those? I don't know.
Oh, that's it. I hadn't even thought
I'm
about
sorry,
that.
I'm not helping you here. I'm trying to
No, no.
simplify things.
I feel like we're all trying to work through what this could mean, and it's not someplace we've really ever been before. So it's weird. Interesting. Okay, is
Yeah.
there anything I missed? Is there anything I didn't ask you about that?
No, I think you're thinking about it right. It's like, what does this mean? With the tariffs, how are businesses thinking about it? I was texting with one business owner earlier today, and he kind of said, "Yeah, I fully expect that there to be other tariffs put in place that they're going to try to fill that tariff gap." So we're going to hold tight. That's one guy, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's representative of general sentiment out there.
That makes sense. Yeah, it seems like this. There are other ways to get around it.
Maybe what part of the way to frame this is like, in some ways, it's going to be a bit back to the drawing board for the administration. They still want to do this, but they're just going to figure out another path.